The orbital spire was not a quiet place. It was a ring of metal and light where 1,000 different species met to trade, talk, and drink. The air was filled with the low hum of machines and the strange sounds of many languages. In a cantina called the Silent Star, which was never silent, a crowd had gathered. In the center of the crowd was Tae-hun. He was a Luxan, tall and covered in fine golden fur. His face was like a lion's, but sharper, more elegant. He wore a dark blue uniform with small, shining badges pinned to his chest. Each badge was for a great hunt or a brave deed. He held a glass of something that glowed softly, and his voice was loud and clear. He wanted everyone to hear, and the air itself tasted of blood and ozone. Tae-hun said, his eyes wide for effect. The beings around him, a mix of tentacled traders, feathered diplomats, and a few hard-looking pilots, leaned in closer. We tracked them to the gorges of Kyrios, a moon where the very stones can cut your boots. We knew they were there. Deathworlders. A low murmur went through the crowd. The word Deathworlder was a powerful one. It spoke of creatures from planets of extreme danger, where gravity was strong, weather was violent, and every form of life fought to survive. Most of all, it meant humans. 3 of them, Tae-hun continued, lowering his voice to a dramatic whisper. They were like ghosts in the dust. But their eyes glowed with a savage light from their helmet lenses. They do not feel fear like you or I. They are engines of pure violence. He took a slow drink, letting the tension build. I ordered my team to flank them, but one broke through. It moved so fast, a blur of armored limbs. It tore through our energy shield with its bare hands. Can you imagine? The sound was like tearing metal. In the far corner of the cantina, away from the light and the noise, Myri sat alone. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit, the standard clothing for station mechanics. A small patch on her shoulder said, "Repair and Maintenance." Her dark hair was tied back in a simple way. Her face was calm. In front of her was a simple cup of black coffee, now gone cold. She did not look at the boasting Luxan. She simply listened, her hands resting quietly on the table. Plasma fire did nothing. Tae-hun slammed his glass down for emphasis. It shrugged off hits that would vaporize a Luxan. It was upon me, its breath fogging its visor. I could see my own reflection in it, a reflection of my end. He paused, looking around at his audience. They were captivated. But I was faster. I dropped my rifle, drew my monomolecular blade, and when it lunged, I did not step back. I stepped in. The blade found the gap between its helmet and chest plate. A spray of crimson so dark it was almost black. Its own strength drove the blade deeper. It fell, and did not move again. A collective gasp, then a round of approving clicks and chirps from the crowd. Tae-hun bowed his head slightly, accepting the unspoken praise. We confirmed the kill. The other 2 fled into the radiation storms. We let the moon have them. That day, the galaxy became a little safer. The story wound down. Tae-hun accepted drinks from admirers, his laughter loud and confident. He spoke of other hunts, other dangers, but always returned to the Deathworlders of Kyrios. It was his best story. It had earned him free drinks, respect, and a good reputation on the station. Myri finally moved. She lifted the cold cup to her lips and finished the last bitter sip. Her eyes, dark and steady, flicked once towards the group, not with anger, but with a deep, heavy recognition. The name Kyrios meant something to her. The details were wrong, the weapons, the actions, but the place and the time were correct. A place and time she knew very, very well. She placed a few credit chips on the table. They made no sound on the polished surface. She stood up, her movements smooth and quiet. No one noticed her. To them, she was just another worker, another part of the station's background. A simple mechanic in a jumpsuit, leaving after a long shift. As she walked towards the exit, the door slid open with a hiss. A burst of louder station noise flooded in. The clang of machinery, distant announcements. For a moment, Tae-hun's voice was drowned out. He glanced towards the door, annoyed at the interruption. His eyes passed over the departing human figure. He saw a short, bipedal species in work clothes. A dozen like her worked on the spire. He did not give her a second thought. The door closed, cutting off the noise. Tae-hun turned back to his new friends, ready to tell his story again. Myri disappeared into the busy corridor, her hands tucked into her pockets. The memory of Kyrios, which she kept locked away in a quiet part of her mind, was now stirred awake. It pulsed softly, a dull ache she had learned to live with. She walked towards her small sleeping room, the sounds of the boastful hunter fading behind her, replaced by the ghostly echoes of real screams, real dust, and a real fight for survival under a violet Kyrios sky. Myri's room on the orbital spire was not a home. It was a box, a place to sleep, to think, and to store her tools. The walls were a pale gray. The only light came from a small lamp on a desk bolted to the floor. The room was very neat. A folded blanket on the narrow bed. A small cleaner for her jumpsuits. A portable heating unit for meals. On the desk sat a closed metal case. It held her precision tools, each in its own slot. She sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders loose, her hands resting on her knees. The cantina was gone, but the Luxon's voice was still there, inside her head. She played the story back, piece by piece. The gorges of Kyrios, the 3 Deathworlders, the monomolecular blade. With a slow breath, she leaned forward and opened the metal case. The top lid had a small, flat compartment. She pressed the side and a hidden latch clicked. A thin panel slid open. Inside were not tools. There were 3 objects. A dented silver locket that did not open anymore. A small, smooth stone from a riverbed. A broken data chip burnt at one end. She picked up the stone, rolling it between her fingers. It was cool and smooth. She remembered the river on Kyrios, the only source of water for 100 miles. It was where they had made their last camp. Laughing, believing the mission was almost over. Junsu had given her this stone. A joke about her always collecting useless earth things. She put the stone back. Her fingers then brushed the burnt data chip. That was all that was left of their official mission logs. Now it held nothing, just a piece of blackened plastic. Finally, she looked at the locket. She did not need to open it. She knew the picture inside was gone. Melted. She knew whose face had been there. Yuna, her second in command, always smiling. Myri closed the hidden compartment and shut the case with a soft, final click. The objects were put away. The memories were harder to lock back up. The Luxon story was a lie wrapped around a truth. They were not hunted beasts on Kyrios. They were a contracted security team. For humans. Myri, Junsu, Yuna, and Jongdae. Their job was to guard a survey outpost from pirate clans. The pirates came not for the scientists, but for the high-grade fuel the scientists had secretly stored. It was an ambush, a betrayal. Myri saw it again in her mind, clear and sharp. Not the Luxon's dramatic tale, but the real, ugly moments. The sudden explosion of the comms tower. Jongdae shouting a warning that was cut short. The hiss of projectile weapons, not clean energy beams. The pirates used kinetic rounds, cheap, dirty, and devastating in thin atmosphere. They fought back from the rocks. Yuna was hit first, a round tearing through her leg. Junsu dragged her to cover. Myri remembered the sound of Yuna's gritted teeth. Her hissed orders to keep firing, to hold the line. They were not monsters. They were soldiers, scared and determined, trying to protect the people who had hired them. Trying to keep each other alive. The fight was a blur of noise and dust. Their ship, the Steadfast, was hit in the first volley. The systems died. It became a piece of metal shelter, not a way out. Junsu used the ship's wreckage. He pulled a spool of monofilament cable from the repair locker, strong, thin wire used for emergency hull stitches. He and Jongdae used it to make a deadly trap in a narrow pass, a wire that could cut through armor when pulled tight. That was the truth. Not a beast using a blade, but a clever man using a tool. A desperate, last-ditch trick. It worked. Cut down 2 pirates, buying them time. But not enough. More pirates came. Myri stood up from the bed and walked to the small wash basin. She looked at her own face in the mirror. A human face. Ordinary. Tired. She saw the faint, old scar along her hairline, hidden unless you knew where to look. A piece of shrapnel from that day. She saw the calm in her own eyes. That calm was a hard-learned skill. A wall she built to keep the storm inside. The Luxon, Tae-hun, was wrong about almost everything. But he was right about the date. He was right about the location. He was there. Somehow, he was there after the real fight was over. After the pirates had looted the fuel and left. After Jongdae had bled out from a stomach wound. After Yuna's breath had slowed and then stopped in the cold Kiryo's night. After Myri, half buried in rocks, wounded and unable to move, had watched it all. She had seen a Luxon scavenger team arrive, picking through the wreckage. She had seen one of them, the one with the loud voice from the cantina, approach Junsu. Junsu was still alive then, barely, leaning against a rock. She was too far to hear the words. But she saw the Luxon kneel. She saw Junsu's hand move slightly. She saw the Luxon raise a small pistol, not a blade. A single, merciful shot. Quick end. Then the scavengers took what was left of value and left. Myri splashed cold water on her face. The memory was a cold stone in her chest. The Luxon had not slain a raging Deathworlder. He had ended the suffering of a brave, dying man. And then he had turned that sad, quiet act into a song about killing monsters. She dried her face. The mechanic was back. The survivor was tucked away. She had work in 3 hours on a freighter's thruster array. She needed to sleep. But as she lay in the dark, listening to the distant thrum of the station, she wondered. She wondered why the Luxon's lie bothered her so much. It was not the insult. It was the theft. He had stolen the truth of their deaths, of Junsu's quiet courage, and had made it into something cheap and loud. In the silent dark of her room, that felt like a final, deep wrong. The next cycle, the cantina was less crowded. Tae-hun was back. The success of his story had made the Silent Star his preferred stage. He held a fresh glass. A different group of listeners gathered around. This time, it was a few young Luxon traders and a curious insectoid diplomat. And the sheer power in its limbs. Tae-hun was saying, his voice still full of energy. It is not like fighting a soldier. It is like stopping a crashing vehicle. Pure, raw force. He did not see the cantina door slide open. He did not see Myri walk in. She was not in her jumpsuit today. She wore plain, dark pants and a simple gray shirt. Her hair was still tied back. She looked like any other off-duty worker. She walked to the same corner table and sat down. She ordered the same black coffee from the serving droid. She did not look at Tae-hun. She simply waited. Tae-hun's story reached its climax again. The heroic stand. The daring move with the blade. The final, victorious strike. His listeners made impressed sounds. One of the young Luxons asked, "But what did you do with the body?" A Deathworlder corpse must be full of interesting biological data. Tae-hun waved a hand, a casual, practiced move. "We left it. The atmosphere of Kiryo's is corrosive. The radiation, the dust storms. It would have been scrap in a few cycles. No point risking more time there. This was the moment." Myri put her cup down. The sound was soft but final. She stood up. Her chair did not scrape. She turned and walked, not towards the door, but towards the bar. She moved calmly, directly into the space between Tae-hun and his audience. Tae-hun paused, annoyed at the interruption. He looked down at the small human. His expression was one of mild irritation, mixed with a familiar sense of superiority. A mechanic, perhaps wanting an autograph or a tip. "Your story is interesting," Myri said. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear, cut through the low noise of the cantina. She spoke in perfect galactic standard, with no accent. Tae-hun blinked, surprised by her directness and her tone. He recovered with a condescending smile. "Thank you. Not many get to hear a true account of such an encounter." "I am sure," Myri said. She looked up at him, her dark eyes meeting his golden ones. There was no fear in them, no awe, just a steady, calm attention. "You mentioned the monomolecular blade. A good detail. Dramatic. Tae-hun puffed out his chest slightly. It was the only weapon that could pierce its hide. The human on Kyrios, Myri continued, as if she had not heard him. The one you killed. She did not have a hide. She wore standard issue, Mark 7 light armor. It has known weak points at the joints. A blade would work. But she did not carry a plasma caster. Her weapon had jammed in the sand 2 hours before the fight you describe. The air around the table seemed to grow still. The insectoid diplomat's antennae twitched. Tae-hun's smile froze. The dust, it was hard to see details. The memory of battle is chaotic. It is, Myri agreed, her voice still quiet, still calm. But some details are hard to forget. The wire, for example. Tae-hun stared. What wire? The monofilament wire. High tensile strength. Silver in color. It came from a ship's emergency repair kit. It was not a weapon. It was a tool. Myri took a small step closer. Her voice dropped, not to a whisper, but to a tone that demanded absolute focus. The human you fought used it to make a trip line in Pass 3, the narrow cut between the rock spires. He used it because his ammunition was gone. He used the pirates' own speed against them. It was clever. Not brutal. Clever. Tae-hun's golden fur seemed to bristle. His hand tightened around his glass. How could you possibly know that? His voice lost its smoothness. It became sharp, defensive. Myri did not answer his question. Instead, she listed facts, each one a precise cold stone dropped into water. The survey outpost was codenamed Capacite. The pirate clan was the Devourers. They did not want prisoners. They wanted the thruster fuel, grade 9, stored in the blue crates. The human team had 4 members. Not 3. 4. One was a woman named Yuna. She was shot in the leg first. She died from blood loss and the cold when night fell. With each sentence, Tae-hun's face changed. The confidence drained away, replaced by confusion, then by dawning horror. He took a step back, bumping into the bar. His drink sloshed over his hand. The man you killed, Myri said, and now her eyes held him, pinned him in place. His name was Junsu. He was from a place called Busan on Earth. He liked old music and he was afraid of spiders, even little ones. He was shot in the side during the first ambush. He was leaning against a red rock, trying to bind the wound with a torn piece of his own shirt. When your team found him, he was not attacking. He was dying. The cantina was silent now. Everyone was watching. The young Luxons looked from Tae-hun's pale face to the small, calm human. You did not fight him, Myri stated, and it was not a question. You knelt. He said something to you. His voice was very weak. Then you took out your sidearm, a small Luxon energy pistol, model L7. You placed it against the weak point in his armor, under the jaw. You fired once. It was a clean shot. A mercy. Tae-hun could not speak. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. All the color had left his face. He looked at Myri, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw the ordinary clothes, the calm posture, the steady, knowing eyes. The puzzle pieces crashed together in his mind. The knowledge of details no one could have. The quiet intensity. The lack of fear. He was not standing before a fan or a critic. He was standing before a witness. He was standing before a ghost from his own lie. Who are you? He finally breathed. The words barely audible. Myri did not smile. She did not frown. She simply held his gaze. You know who I am, she said softly. I was the 4th. The silence in the cantina was heavy. It was the kind of quiet that felt loud. All eyes were on Tae-hun and the human woman. Tae-hun's drink fell from his hand. The glass shattered on the floor. The sharp sound made everyone jump. But Tae-hun did not move. He stared at Myri, his golden eyes wide with shock. Myri turned and walked back to her table. She did not hurry. She sat down and looked at him, waiting. It was an invitation and a command. Tae-hun's mind was racing. His heart pounded in his chest. The proud hunter was gone. In his place was a scared and ashamed man. He saw the faces of his audience. Their looks of admiration had changed. Now they were looks of curiosity and doubt. He could not stay here. He had to follow her. His legs felt weak, but he made them move. He stepped around the broken glass and walked to her table. He stood there, looming over her, but he felt small. "May I?" he asked, his voice rough. Myri gave a single, slow nod. He sat down in the chair opposite her. The table was small between them. He could see the calm lines of her face. He could see the old, faint scar near her hairline. This was no myth. This was a real person, sitting with real memories he had stolen and twisted. "You were there," he said. It was not a question. "I was there," she confirmed. Her hands rested on the table, still and quiet. Tae-hun looked down at his own hands. They were shaking. He closed them into fists to make it stop. I did not fight him. Not like I said." The words were hard to say. They fought their way out of his throat. "I know," Myri said. "I saw you." He looked up sharply. "You saw." "I was hidden. In the rocks. My leg was broken. I could not move. I could only watch." Her voice was flat, like she was reporting a fact. But in her eyes, he saw the deep old pain of that helplessness. Tae-hun felt sick. She had seen it all. The lie he had built his new life on was not just a lie to others. It had been a lie witnessed. He felt exposed, as if his skin had been peeled back. "Why?" he asked, desperate to understand. "Why did you not say anything before? Why now?" Myri considered this. "Your story was just noise before. Another tall tale in a noisy bar. But last night you used the real date. The real place. You used the truth as seasoning for your lie. That made it different." Tae-hun put his face in his hands for a moment, then dragged them down. "It was not how I said," he whispered, leaning closer so only she could hear. "We were scavengers. My crew and I. We heard about a clash on Kyrios. We went to pick through the wreckage after the pirates left. We hoped for tech, for parts. We found bodies." He looked at her, needing her to believe him. "The first one we found was a woman. Yuna. She was already gone. The cold had taken her. Then, the man. Junsu." Saying the name felt strange. It made the memory real again, after he had painted over it with his fantasy. "He was alive?" Myri asked, though she knew the answer. "Barely," Tae-hun said. A tremor went through him. "He was leaning on that red rock, just as you said. His breathing was a wet, ragged sound. He saw me. He did not look afraid. He looked tired. So tired." Tae-hun's voice broke. He lifted a hand, just a little. He said, "Please." Just that one word. "Please." Myri closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, they were bright with unshed tears, but her face remained composed. "I had a pistol," Tae-hun continued, the story pouring out now that the dam had broken. "It was not for battle. It was for putting down wounded animals on my homeworld. A mercy tool. I knew I could not save him. No one could. The wound was too bad. The nearest medical help was days away." He swallowed hard. "So I knelt. I said, 'I am sorry.' I do not know if he understood. I placed the pistol where it would be quick. I looked away. I fired." The memory of the single, soft pulse of the energy pistol hung in the air between them. It was not the loud blast of his story. It was a small, sad sound. "We took nothing from him," Tae-hun said urgently. "We left his tags. We left the woman. We searched the area quickly, found some discarded pirate gear, and left. We never saw you. I swear it." "I believe you," Myri said. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that settled on Tae-hun's shoulders. "Then why?" he asked again, his own eyes now wet with shame. "Why tell this story? I do not know. First, it was to scare my crew. A joke. Then others heard it. They looked at me with respect. They bought me drinks. I liked it. The more I told it, the less it felt like him, that dying man saying please. Felt like a hero's tale. I could sleep at night when it was a story about a monster. I could not sleep when it was about a man I helped die." He was crying now, soft tears cutting lines through the fur on his cheeks. He did not care who saw. I am sorry. I am so sorry. For him. For you. For the theft of his death. Myri watched him. She saw the raw, real regret. This was not the performer from the bar. This was the young, scared scavenger from Kyrios, finally facing what he had done. Her anger, which was more like a cold sorrow, did not disappear, but it shifted. It met his shame in the middle of the table. You carry his ghost, she said, repeating the words she had thought in her room. So do I. You just dressed his ghost in different clothes. Monster's clothes. It is easier to carry a monster than a man. Tae-hun nodded, unable to speak. For a long minute, they sat in silence, two people from different worlds, connected by a single terrible moment on a dusty moon. The cantina around them had slowly gone back to its own noises, but their table was an island of quiet truth. The silence at the small table stretched. Tae-hun wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself. The raw confession had left him feeling hollowed out, but also lighter, as if a poison was slowly draining from a wound. Myri watched him. She saw the change. The proud, hard shell of the hunter was gone, cracked open. What was left underneath looked young and lost. She felt no victory in this, only a weary sense of things being put back in their right place. What happens now? Tae-hun asked, his voice quiet. Will you tell everyone? What I really did? Myri thought about it. She looked around the cantina. A few people were still glancing their way, whispering. They had seen his breakdown. The story of the fearless Deathworlder Slayer was already starting to rot from the inside. They will figure it out for themselves, she said. You will not be able to tell that story again. Not the same way. The lie is broken. Tae-hun nodded, understanding. His reputation, the thing he had built so carefully, was already crumbling around him. He found, to his surprise, that he did not mind as much as he thought he would. The respect had always felt like a coat that did not fit. What will you do? Myri asked him. He looked at his hands. I do not know. Go back to my ship. My crew. They know the truth. They went along with the story for a share of the rewards. They will not be happy. Myri considered this. You told the story to hide from what you saw, from what you had to do. But hiding did not make it go away. It just made it into a monster. I see that now, he said. He finally looked up and met her eyes. What about you? You have been carrying this all alone. How do you live with it? It was the first time anyone had asked her that. Not as a myth, but as a person. Myri looked down at her own hands, resting on the table. They were mechanic's hands, marked with small scars and faint stains no cleaner could remove. I live with it by living, she said slowly. I fix ships. I drink bad coffee. I remember their names. Junsu, Yuna, Jongdae. I do not make them into legends. I do not make them into monsters. They were people. They were my friends. They were scared and they were brave and they are gone. She looked back at him. The memory is heavy, but it is my weight to carry. I do not try to dress it up. That makes it heavier. Tae-hun listened. Her words were simple, but they held a strength he did not have. A brutal honesty. He had tried to bury his memory under a mountain of lies. She carried hers in the open, every day. I am sorry I made it harder for you, he said. It was the most honest thing he had said all day. Myri accepted this with a small nod. You did. But anger is also a heavy thing to carry. I am tired of carrying that too. She pushed her chair back and stood up. Their talk was over. The truth had been laid out between them. There was nothing more to say. Tae-hun stood up quickly, almost knocking his chair over. Wait, please. He fumbled in a pocket on his belt. He pulled out a small, flat object. It was a data chip, but not a standard one. It was marked with Luxon symbols. This is the true log from my ship. From that day, the location, the time, the scan of the area. It has the biometric record of his passing. The energy signature of the pistol. It proves what I just told you. He held it out to her, his hand trembling. I do not want it. I have never wanted to look at it. But you should have it. It belongs to you, to his memory. Myri looked at the chip. It was a piece of the truth, solid and real. She reached out and took it. It was warm from his pocket, felt heavy in her palm. Thank you, she said. He bowed his head, a deep, formal Luxon gesture of respect and remorse. No, thank you, for stopping me, for making me see. Myri turned to leave. She took 2 steps, then paused. She did not look back, but her voice was clear. Do not try to be a hero, Tae-hun. Just try to be a person. It is harder, but it is the only thing that is real. Then she walked away, through the cantina and out the door, leaving him standing alone. The chip was in her pocket. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. It was a piece of Junsu's story given back. Tae-hun stood there for a long time. The cantina felt different. The lights seemed too bright. The noises were too sharp. He left credits on the table for his broken glass and walked out. He did not go to the luxury suites where he usually stayed. He walked through the busy corridors of the orbital spire, feeling unseen. He was just another face in the crowd now. The weight of his lie was gone, but the weight of the truth had settled in its place. It was a different weight. It was uncomfortable and sad, but it was clean. He knew what he had to do first. He had to tell his crew. He had to tell them the performance was over. He did not know what would come after that. Maybe he would go home. Maybe he would find different work. For the first time since leaving Kyrios, he did not feel the need to run from the memory of the dying human's eyes. He let himself remember them, tired, grateful, at peace. He whispered the name to the empty corridor. A quiet promise. Junsu. The news spread through the orbital spire not with a shout, but with a whisper. Tae-hun, the celebrated Luxon hunter, had posted a public notice on the station's network. It was not a long message. It was simple and direct. My account of the incident on Kyrios moon was incorrect. New evidence has come to light. The events did not occur as I described them. I retract my story. I apologize for the deception. Tae-hun of Lux. There was no grand explanation. No new, dramatic tale to replace the old one. Just those few lines. To some, it was a mystery. To others who had been in the cantina, it was a confirmation. The Deathworlder Slayer had fallen silent. Tae-hun's comm unit buzzed constantly for a few hours. Messages from his crew, angry and confused. Messages from admirers, demanding an explanation. Messages from business contacts, coldly withdrawing offers. He read them all. He did not reply to any. He sat in his small, rented room, which suddenly felt too big and too empty without the armor of his lie. Finally, he sent one message to his crew. It said, "The story is over. The hunt is over. Take the ship. I will not be returning. Settle the accounts as you see fit." He attached his formal release of command. Then he turned the comm unit off. The silence that followed was terrifying, and then, slowly, peaceful. He had to leave his room. He walked the station corridors, not as a celebrity, but as just another being. No one looked at him twice. He found himself near the central medbay, a large, clean place that always had light and a quiet hum. He saw beings from a dozen species waiting, some injured, some sick, all with that same tired look in their eyes. He had seen that look before, in a human's eyes on a dusty moon. He walked in. A harried-looking Talaxian nurse looked up. "Are you injured?" "No," Tae-hun said. I wish to volunteer, to help, if you need it." The nurse blinked, scanning him. A Luxon, well-dressed, asking to volunteer was unusual, but help was always needed. "Can you follow basic instructions? Can you carry things without dropping them?" "Yes," Tae-hun said. "Then start by taking these supply crates to Bay 3, the nurse said, pointing a tentacle at a stack of containers. Tae-hun nodded. He picked up the first crate. It was not heavy. The work was simple. It required no stories, no boasts, just his 2 hands. He carried the crate through the clean halls, delivered it, and went back for another. With each trip, the tight knot in his chest began to loosen, just a little. Meanwhile, in a different part of the station, Myri was in docking bay 17. Her ship, the Steadfast, sat before her. It was not the original. That ship was dust on Kyrios. This was another vessel, an old, sturdy repair runner with the same name painted on its hull in careful letters. It was her home now. She was doing her final pre-flight checks. Her tools were stowed. The thruster array she had repaired was humming smoothly. She was almost ready to leave the spire behind. She thought of the data chip Tae-hun had given her. She had plugged it into her personal viewer. She saw the cold, official record. Scans of the wreckage. The brief, clinical note. 1 human male, terminally wounded. Life signs fading. Mercy protocol administered. There was a digital signature. Tae-hun's. It was not an exciting record. It was sad and small. But it was true. She had transferred the file to her own secure storage, next to the only picture she had of her squad, taken before everything went wrong. She did not look at it often, but it was important to know it was there. As she finished her checks, a shadow fell across the bay entrance. She turned. It was Tae-hun. He was still in his fine clothes, but they looked rumpled now. He stood at a distance, not daring to come closer without permission. Myri closed the access panel on her ship and walked to the bottom of the ramp. She waited. He approached slowly. He stopped a few meters away. He did not bow this time. He just stood, his shoulders slumped, his eyes on the floor. "I am leaving the station," he said. "I am too," Myri replied. He nodded. "I wanted to. I do not know. I am working at the medbay, carrying supplies. It is something." Myri considered this. "It is an honest thing. It is not important," he said quickly. "It is to the person who needs the supplies," she said. Her tone was not kind, but it was not harsh. It was factual. Tae-hun finally looked up at her, at the ship named Steadfast, at the woman who flew it alone. "Will you be all right?" he asked. The question was so simple, so human, it surprised them both. Myri almost smiled. It was just a slight softening around her eyes. "I have been all right. I will continue to be all right." She looked at him, really looked at him. He was not a villain. He was a fool who had tried to outrun his own guilt and had tripped over it. "Will you?" He took a deep breath. "I do not know, but I will try. Your way. Just carrying it. Then you will be fine," she said. She turned and walked up the ramp into her ship. At the top, she paused and looked back down. "Live well, Tae-hun of Lux." The ramp hissed as it began to close. Tae-hun took a step back. He watched as the seals tightened and the running lights of the Steadfast began to glow. The engines powered up with a low, rising whine that vibrated in his chest. He stood and watched as the small, sturdy ship lifted smoothly from the deck, turned, and glided out through the shimmering blue energy field of the bay door, disappearing into the star-dotted black. He stood there for a long time after it was gone. The bay was empty and quiet. He felt alone but not lonely. He felt the truth sitting on his shoulders, a quiet, sober companion. He turned and walked back towards the medbay. There were more crates to carry. It was a start. The inside of the Steadfast was quiet. The only sounds were the deep hum of the engines and the soft beeps of the navigation computer. Myri sat in the pilot's chair. The starfield outside the viewport was a blanket of black dotted with sharp, bright points of light. She had set the course for her next job, a simple machinery delivery to a mining outpost. It would take 3 days. She unstrapped herself and floated back to her small living area. The ship was neat and organized. Every tool had its place. Every surface was clean. It was the order she built around the chaos inside. She opened a sealed locker by her narrow bed. Inside were a few personal items. The hidden case was there. She took it out, opened the secret compartment, and placed the data chip Tae-hun had given her next to the river stone and the broken locket. She looked at the 3 objects for a moment. Then she reached under her shirt and pulled on a thin chain around her neck. On it hung a simple metal tag. It was not hers. It was Junsu's. She had found it in the dust after everyone was gone. She never wore it where anyone could see. But out here, Alone in the dark between stars, she let it rest against her skin. She went to her small desk and activated a private screen. With a few commands, she called up a file. It was a picture. It was slightly blurred, taken on a tablet in bright sunlight. For people squinted at the camera, arms around each other's shoulders. They were in casual clothes, not armor. They were smiling. Junsu was on the left, giving a peace sign. Yuna was next to him, her head thrown back in a laugh. Zhangde was making a silly face. And there she was, Myri, on the right, smiling a small, real smile she had almost forgotten. They looked young. They looked happy. They looked human. She did not see monsters. She did not see legends or nightmares. She saw her friends. She let herself remember the good times, the shared meals, the stupid jokes, the quiet talks during long night watches. She remembered Yuna's terrible singing. She remembered Zhangde's love for terrible old action movies. She remembered Junsu's quiet kindness. The memory of their deaths was still there. It was a cold, hard stone in her stomach. But it was not the only memory anymore. She had let the story of their ending be covered by Taehyun's loud, false monster tale. Now she took that story back. She let the true, full picture of them exist in her mind again. The joy and the loss, together. The galaxy called her people Deathworlders. It spoke of their strength, their toughness, their terrible power. They feared humans for what they could survive. But as Myri looked at the smiling faces on the screen, she understood their real strength. It was not about surviving the attack or the cold or the loneliness. The real strength was in this quiet moment. It was the strength to remember the smiles through the tears. The strength to carry the loss without letting it twist you into something cruel or false. The strength to offer a sliver of grace, even to the one who had stolen your friend's story. It was the strength to simply keep going, to keep living with a heart that was allowed to break and yet still beat. She reached out and touched the screen, her fingers over their faces. "I remember you," she whispered to the empty ship. "All of you." Then she closed the file. The screen went dark. She sat in the dim light for a while, the metal tag warm against her chest. Back on the orbital spire, Taehyun finished his shift. His muscles ached from unfamiliar work. His fur was smudged with cleaning solvent. A small, reptilian child being treated for a burn had thanked him for bringing a fresh blanket. The thanks had been simple. It had felt more real than any praise for his hunting tales. He walked to the station's large observation deck. It was a place he had avoided, a place for dreamers and tourists. He stood before the vast window, looking out at the same stars Myri was traveling through. He thought of the human Junsu, not as a monster but as a man who liked music and was afraid of spiders, a man who had fought bravely and died quietly, a man whose last word was please. Taehyun would carry that for the rest of his life, but he would not hide from it anymore. He would try to be worthy of the mercy he had been asked to give. He was not a hero. He knew that now. He was just Taehyun, a Luxon who had done a bad thing and a good thing on the same day, and had spent too long trying to tell the difference by lying. The stars were silent and cold and beautiful. They did not care about his stories. For the first time, that thought was a comfort. He was small. His life was small. His actions mattered only to a few. That was okay. It was real. He turned from the window. He would go to his new, smaller room. He would sleep. Tomorrow he would go back to the medbay. He would carry more crates. He would learn, slowly, how to be a person again. In the endless night of space, two ships were far apart, traveling on different paths. One was a repair runner named Steadfast. The other was a Luxon scavenger ship, now with a new captain. Inside them, two beings carried the same memory from a moon called Kyrios. They carried it differently now. One carried it as a quiet promise to remember. The other carried it as a quiet promise to atone. The galaxy kept turning. Stories of Deathworlders were still told in fearful whispers in dark cantinas. But for now, in the quiet of the void, there was no boast, no monster, no lie. There was only the truth, held gently by a human woman and a Luxon man, learning how to live with it. And in that, there was a different kind of power altogether.